Everybody Lies: Big Data, New Data, and What the Internet Can Tell Us About Who We Really Are, by Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. Introduction. In the lead-up to the 2016 American presidential election, nearly every expert, every pollster, and every seasoned journalist said the same thing: Donald Trump didn't stand a chance. It seemed obvious. The polls showed it. People's public statements confirmed it. He had insulted too many people, broken too many norms. The data seemed clear. But underneath the surface, in the quiet, private corners of the internet, a different story was being told. A far darker and more surprising story. A few years earlier, a young data scientist named Seth Stephens-Davidowitz was exploring a new tool from Google. He was looking at what people were secretly searching for in the privacy of their own homes. And he stumbled upon a chilling discovery. He found a map of America that looked nothing like the one we see on the news. It wasn't a map of red states and blue states. It was a map of hidden rage. He found that the single greatest predictor of which parts of the country would rally behind Donald Trump was the frequency of Google searches for racial slurs. This wasn't a poll. This wasn't a survey. This was the raw, unfiltered truth of what people were thinking when they thought no one was watching. This one discovery opens up a profound question that sits at the heart of the book we're exploring today: Everybody Lies. The question is this: what if everything we thought we knew about people was wrong? What if the surveys we trust, the polls we follow, and even what our friends tell us are all just part of a grand performance? And what if there was a way to peek behind the curtain? That is the bold promise of this book. It offers us a key to a secret diary, a diary being written by all of humanity, every single day. The author, a former Google data scientist, discovered what he calls a digital truth serum. It's a tool so powerful it can reveal our hidden fears, our secret desires, our quiet prejudices, and the surprising truths about who we really are. By the end of our time together, you won't just understand what this tool is. You will see how it has been used to answer some of the deepest questions about human nature. Questions like, how many men are truly gay? What is the real root of racism in America? And what do women worry about more than anything else when it comes to their bodies? The answers will surprise you. They might even shock you, but they will give you a powerful new lens through which to see the world. So, let's begin our journey into the hidden side of the human psyche. Book summary. Let's start with a simple, almost universal truth. One that the title of this book lays bare. Everybody lies. Think about it. We lie to our friends, our parents, our doctors, and our bosses. We lie about how much we drink, how often we exercise, and whether we actually read that book our friend recommended. We say we're happy when we're sad. We say we'll call when we have no intention of doing so. And we especially lie to surveys. For decades, surveys were the gold standard for understanding society. You ask 1,000 people a question, and you get a snapshot of the truth. Right? Well, not quite. The author points to a classic study where researchers tracked condom sales. According to Nielsen, the company that tracks what we buy, Americans purchase about 600 million condoms a year. But when you ask people in surveys how many condoms they use, the numbers tell a wildly different story. Based on what women report, it adds up to 1.1 billion condoms a year. Based on what men report, it's 1.6 billion. Someone is lying. Or, more accurately, everyone is lying. This isn't just about sex. People tell surveys they voted when they didn't. They say they donate to charity when they haven't. They inflate their college grades. Why? Because we all have a deep-seated desire to look good, even to an anonymous pollster on the phone. We are performing. We are presenting the best version of ourselves, not the truest version. And for the longest time, we had no way of knowing what the true version looked like. Until now. This is where Seth Stephens-Davidowitz introduces his revolutionary idea. He says that in the 21st century, we have been given a gift. A source of data so honest, so raw, that it acts like a digital truth serum. That gift is the Google search bar. Think about the conditions under which you use Google. You're usually alone. There's no one there to judge you. And most importantly, you have a powerful incentive to be honest. If you're worried about a strange medical symptom, you don't type in what you think the doctor wants to hear. You type in the truth, because you genuinely want an answer. If you have a secret desire or a dark thought, you might confess it to that little white box, knowing it won't judge you. As the author puts it, people's search for information is, in itself, information. And when you multiply those little traces of truth by the millions, you start to see profound realities about who we are. Take marriage, for instance. If you look at surveys, you might think the biggest problem in marriages is communication or money. But what are people telling Google? The most common complaint about a marriage searched on Google is not having sex. Searches for sexless marriage are more than 3 times more common than searches for unhappy marriage, and 8 times more common than loveless marriage. This is the hidden world Google reveals. It's a world where our private anxieties are laid bare. And sometimes, those anxieties reveal a much darker side of humanity than we are comfortable admitting. This brings us back to the story we opened with. Back in 2008, when Barack Obama was first elected, the official story, backed by polls from respected sources like Gallup, was that America had entered a post-racial era. The survey suggested that a candidate's race was no longer a major factor for voters. But the author, then a curious graduate student, started typing some unsettling words into Google Trends. He typed in the N-word. He was shocked. He expected it to be a rare search. Instead, he found that in the United States, searches for the N-word were as common as searches for words like migraine or economist. What were people looking for? It wasn't rap lyrics. The data showed that a huge portion of these searches were for jokes mocking African Americans. Searches like stupid N-words or I hate N-words numbered in the millions every year. On the night of Obama's historic election, while the world was celebrating, searches for N-word president and KKK spiked. A hidden, vicious racism was bubbling just beneath the surface, completely invisible to the old tools of social science. Stephens-Davidowitz used this data to draw a new map of racism in America. It wasn't the simple North versus South divide that many people assumed. Instead, the highest rates of racist searches were concentrated in a belt that stretched across parts of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and down into the rural South. And it wasn't just a Republican issue. The searches were just as high in many heavily Democratic areas. This data proved to have stunning predictive power. The author found that in the areas with the most racist searches, Obama consistently underperformed compared to the white Democratic candidate from 4 years earlier, John Kerry. The data suggested that raw racism cost Obama about 4 percentage points of the national vote, a far larger effect than any survey had ever hinted at. And 4 years later, that same map of hidden racism became the single strongest predictor for support of Donald Trump in the Republican primaries. The rage that the polls had missed, the rage that polite society ignored, had been sitting there all along, waiting for a candidate to give it a voice. Google searches had revealed that we were living in a very different country than the one we thought we knew. This discovery points to the first great power of this new world of data. It offers us new types of data, information we never had access to before. For centuries, we could only guess at people's secret thoughts. Now, they are written down, aggregated, and available for analysis. But it's not just about Google searches. The author shows us how this principle of data reimagined is changing how we understand the world in almost every field. Consider the world of horse racing. For generations, the way you picked a future champion was by looking at its pedigree, its family tree. It was all about the bloodline. But a man named Jeff Sater, a Harvard-educated data geek, decided to ignore all that. He thought, what if the secret to a great racehorse isn't in its family tree, but inside its body? He invented his own portable ultrasound machine and started measuring the internal organs of thousands of horses. He measured nostril size, muscle fibers, even the size of their excrement. Most of it was useless. But then he found the secret. He discovered that the single greatest predictor of a horse's success was the size of its heart, specifically its left ventricle. One day, Sater was evaluating a young, reddish-brown horse known only as number 85. Its pedigree was good, but not great. It had a scratch on its ankle. Most experts weren't particularly impressed. But when Sater looked at the data from his ultrasound, his jaw dropped. The horse's left ventricle was in the 99.61 st percentile. It was a 1 in a million heart. Sater's team begged the owner, Ahmed Zayat, not to sell the horse. Zayat was so convinced that he secretly bought his own horse back at the auction. That horse was later given a name, American Pharoah. 18 months later, he became the first horse in over 3 decades to win the Triple Crown. Sater had found a new type of data, the size of a horse's heart, and it gave him an insight that the old experts, with their focus on pedigree, had completely missed. This same principle applies everywhere. The author tells the story of 2 economists, Matt Gensko and Jesse Shapiro, who wanted to measure media bias objectively. How do you measure something so subjective? They realized the answer was in the words themselves. They turned language into data. They analyzed the congressional record and found that Democrats and Republicans consistently use different phrases to talk about the same issues. Republicans say death tax, Democrats say estate tax. Republicans talk about reform Social Security, Democrats call it privatized Social Security. They then built a model based on these politically charged phrases and used it to analyze hundreds of newspapers across the country. They could give each newspaper a political slant score. And what did they find? The answer to why some papers lean left and others lean right wasn't about the political views of the billionaire owners. It was much simpler. Newspapers give readers what they want. In liberal cities, the papers were liberal. In conservative cities, the papers were conservative. It wasn't a grand conspiracy, it was just capitalism. Words are data. Hearts are data. Even pictures are data. Researchers have analyzed a century of high school yearbook photos and found a clear trend. Americans, especially women, started smiling in their photos around the mid-20th century. Why? Not because they got happier, but because Kodak launched a massive advertising campaign associating photography with happy moments. Our smiles are the result of a marketing strategy. Even light from outer space can be data. Economists have found that they can measure the economic growth of developing countries by analyzing satellite photos of how much light they emit at night. When an economy is growing, more people can afford electricity, and the country literally gets brighter. This brings us to the second power of big data. It provides honest data. This is the digital truth serum we talked about. Because of anonymity and incentives, sites like Google and Pornhub get people to admit things they would never say anywhere else. And this honesty allows us to answer some of our most sensitive questions. For example, how many men in America are gay? For years, the number has been a subject of intense debate. The famous Kinsey report in the 1940s claimed it was 10%, but his sample was heavily skewed. Modern surveys put the number closer to 2 or 3%. But we know people lie about their sexuality, especially in less tolerant places. The author tackles this question like a detective, using 3 different layers of data. First, he looks at surveys and Facebook profiles, where people openly identify as gay. In tolerant states like Rhode Island, the percentage of openly gay men is nearly double that of intolerant states like Mississippi. Part of this is due to migration, gay men moving to more accepting places. But the data shows that can only explain less than half of the difference. The rest is explained by the closet. So, how do you measure what's happening inside the closet? You turn to the digital truth serum. The author analyzed anonymous data from Google and porn sites. He found that nationwide, about 5% of all male porn searches are for gay male porn. And here's the fascinating part: that number is remarkably consistent across the country. In tolerant Rhode Island, it's 5.2%. In intolerant Mississippi, it's 4.8%. The desire is there, even if it's hidden. This suggests the true figure for gay men in the U.S. is likely around 5%, meaning millions of men, particularly in less tolerant states, are still in the closet. The data paints a poignant picture of this hidden struggle. Searches for "Is my husband gay?" are highest in the states with the lowest support for gay marriage. In those same states, you see more men searching for things like gay test immediately after searching for gay porn, suggesting a deep internal conflict. This honest data also reveals our deepest insecurities. What do men and women worry about most when it comes to their bodies? For men, the answer probably won't surprise you: their penis. Men Google more questions about their penis than about their lungs, liver, brain, and feet combined. The number one concern is size. But here's the twist: do women care? According to their Google searches, almost not at all. For every 170 searches men make about their own penis, women make only 1 about a partner's. And when they do, a surprising number of those searches, over 40%, are complaints that it's too big, often associated with searches about pain during sex. So, if men are obsessed with their penis size, what's the female equivalent? What is the biggest bodily insecurity for women, as expressed on Google? It's not their weight, or their breasts, or wrinkles. It's worrying about whether their vagina smells. Women make nearly as many searches expressing concern about their genitals as men do. And the number one concern is odor. They worry it smells like fish, or vinegar, or even onions. It's a secret anxiety shared by millions, but rarely spoken of. And once again, the data shows a disconnect. Men rarely search about a partner's vagina. When they do, it's usually not to complain, but to ask for advice on how to bring up the topic of an odor without hurting her feelings. The profound lesson here is that we are all so busy judging our own bodies that we have little energy left over to judge anyone else's. This leads us to the third power of big data: it allows us to zoom in. Because these datasets are so massive, containing information on millions of people, we can focus on tiny, specific slices of the population to uncover patterns that would be invisible in a small survey. Take the work of economist Raj Chetty. He got access to the tax records of every single American. At first, he used this massive dataset to ask the same old questions about tax policy and got the same old answers. He was discouraged. But then he realized his mistake. The power wasn't just in having more data, it was in being able to ask new kinds of questions. He decided to zoom in on geography. He asked, "Is America truly the land of opportunity?" If you look at the country as a whole, the answer is no. A child born into a poor family in the U.S. has a much lower chance of becoming rich than a child in Canada or Denmark. But Chetty's data showed that this is the wrong way to look at it. America isn't one country. It's a collection of societies. If you grow up poor in San Jose, California, your chances of climbing the income ladder are as good as anywhere in the world. But if you grow up poor in Charlotte, North Carolina, your chances are lower than in any other developed country. By zooming in, Chetty could see that where you grow up has a massive impact on your destiny. This power of zooming in also helped the author solve a personal mystery. Why does he love baseball, while his younger brother Noah finds it impossibly boring? He used Facebook data, looking at the favorite baseball teams of millions of men, broken down by their year of birth. And he found a stunning pattern. A man's favorite baseball team is overwhelmingly predicted by which team won the World Series when he was around 8 years old. The data shows a clear peak. The years between 5 and 15 are the critical window for cementing a lifelong fan. The author was born at just the right time to be 8 years old when his beloved New York Mets won the World Series in 1986. His brother Noah was born 4 years later, and was spared this lifetime of suffering. This isn't just about baseball. Other researchers have used the same technique to show that our political views are largely formed by the time we are 18, imprinted by the popularity of the president in power during our teenage years. Our identities are shaped by these arbitrary facts of when and where we were born. Big data, with its ability to zoom in, is the only tool that can see these patterns with such clarity. Finally, we arrive at the fourth power of big data. It allows us to run endless causal experiments. In science, the gold standard for proving that one thing causes another is the randomized controlled experiment. You take two groups, give one a treatment like a new drug and the other a placebo, and see what happens. This is how we know if a medicine actually works. But in the real world, these experiments are expensive and slow. In the digital world, however, they are cheap, fast, and can be run on millions of people without them even knowing it. This is often called A/B testing. In 2008, Barack Obama's campaign team wanted to figure out the best design for their website to get more people to sign up and donate. Their original page had a picture of the candidate and a button that said "Sign Up." But was that the best combination? They decided to test it. They ran an experiment where different visitors saw different combinations of pictures and buttons. Maybe a picture of his family would work better? Maybe the button should say "Learn More." The results were astounding. The winning combination was a picture of the Obama family with a button that said "Learn More." This simple change, discovered through A/B testing, increased sign-ups by 40%. The campaign estimated that this one experiment netted them an additional $60 million in donations. This power to experiment is now used everywhere online. Every time you see a different headline on a news site or a different button color on Facebook, you are likely part of an A/B test designed to figure out what makes you click. Sometimes, though, you don't even need to design an experiment. Sometimes, nature runs one for you. Economists call these natural experiments. For years, no one could definitively prove if TV advertising actually worked. Of course, companies that spend a lot on ads tend to have high sales. But is that correlation or causation? Maybe they spend a lot because they already have a great product. Companies were unwilling to run a true experiment, like not advertising in 20 cities, because it seemed too risky. So, how do you solve this? The author and his colleagues found a brilliant natural experiment hidden in the Super Bowl. By the time the Super Bowl is played, companies have already bought their expensive ad slots. They don't know which two teams will be playing. But the outcome of the championship games a few weeks earlier has a huge impact on viewership. If the New England Patriots make it to the Super Bowl, viewership in Boston will be massive. If they lose to the Baltimore Ravens, viewership in Baltimore will be massive instead. For an advertiser, it's like a random coin flip determining whether tens of thousands of extra people in Boston or Baltimore will see their ad. By comparing sales data in the winning and losing cities, the researchers could finally measure the true causal effect of a Super Bowl ad. And the results were stunning. They found that for every dollar a movie studio spent on a Super Bowl ad, they got back nearly $3 in increased ticket sales. The ads were incredibly effective. This same logic can be used to answer some of life's biggest questions. Does it matter where you go to college? Everyone knows that graduates from elite universities like Harvard, on average, earn more than graduates from a good state school like Penn State. But again, is that correlation or causation? Maybe Harvard just attracts more talented students to begin with. To find out, economists Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger used a clever natural experiment. They compared students who were accepted to both Harvard and Penn State. Some chose Harvard. Others, for various personal reasons, chose Penn State. These two groups of students were, in the eyes of the admissions committees, equally talented. So what happened to them 10 years later? Their incomes were more or less identical. The study suggests that for a talented student, the drive and ability you bring with you are far more important than the name on your diploma. It's not the school that makes you successful. You make the school look good. Of course, with all this power comes responsibility and potential for misuse. The author is careful to point out the limitations and dangers of big data. First, there's the curse of dimensionality. When you have millions of variables to test, like every possible Google search term, it's easy to find a random correlation that looks meaningful but is actually just noise. This is why so many studies that claim to predict the stock market with tweets or Google searches fail. They've just found a lucky coin that came up heads 10 times in a row. Second, there's the danger of focusing only on what's easy to measure. A teacher's value can't be reduced to a single test score. A person's worth can't be measured by their Facebook likes. We risk becoming obsessed with optimizing for a number and losing sight of the more important, unquantifiable aspects of life. And finally, there are the ethical questions. Do we want corporations using our secret anxieties to price discriminate, charging us more because our data profile suggests we're a big spender? Casinos are already doing this, using data to calculate each gambler's pain point, the maximum amount of money they can lose before they stop coming back, and then using that information to extract as much money from them as possible. Do we want governments using our search history to predict crime? While the data can be useful for allocating resources, like sending more police to protect a mosque after a spike in hateful searches, it's a terrible tool for predicting what any single individual will do. Millions of people have dark thoughts, very few act on them. The line between protection and a Minority Report-style pre-crime unit is a fine one, and one we must be very careful not to cross. In the end, this new science of data is like any powerful tool. It can be used to build or to destroy. It can be used to exploit people's weaknesses, or it can be used to understand our shared humanity and help those who are suffering in silence. The author concludes with a final brilliant twist that perfectly encapsulates the book's core message. He describes how he was struggling to write the conclusion, wanting to make it profound and perfect. But then he came across a study that used data from Amazon to see how many people actually finish the books they buy. The data was clear. For dense nonfiction books written by economists, the completion rate is shockingly low. Fewer than 3% of readers made it to the end of Thomas Piketty's celebrated book, Capital in the 21st Century. The data was telling him that very few people would even be reading his carefully crafted conclusion. So, he decided to follow the data. He ends the book by saying he's going to stop working on the damn conclusion and go get a beer with his friends. Because too few of us, big data tells him, are still reading. Commentary. So, what do we take away from this incredible journey into the world of big data? For me, the most powerful lesson in Everybody Lies is not just that people lie, but that the truth, in its raw and unfiltered form, is finally becoming visible. For the first time in human history, we have a tool that can systematically measure the difference between our public selves and our private selves. And that gap is where the most interesting stories about humanity are found. This book serves as a powerful reminder that our intuition, even when it feels right, can be deeply flawed. We believe the world is becoming more polarized because of the internet, but the data shows we are actually more likely to encounter opposing viewpoints online than we are in our own families or neighborhoods. We believe that growing up poor and hungry for success is what it takes to make it to the NBA, but the data shows that players from stable, middle-class backgrounds have a significant advantage. We believe that going to an elite university is the key to a successful career, but the data suggests that for talented students, it matters very little. Time and again, the data shows us a world that works in precisely the opposite way we thought it did. And this is both unsettling and incredibly hopeful. It's unsettling to confront the hidden racism, the secret insecurities, and the quiet suffering that this data uncovers. It's not always a pretty picture of who we are. But it's hopeful because, as the author argues, collecting rich data on the world's problems is the first step toward fixing them. You can't solve a problem you can't see. And big data is like a powerful microscope, allowing us to see societal problems with a clarity we've never had before. We can see the children who are suffering from abuse but are missed by official reports. We can see the men and women struggling with their sexuality and communities that don't accept them. We can see which policies actually work and which ones backfire. So, how can we apply this in our own lives? I think there are two simple but profound actions we can take away from this. First, develop a healthy skepticism for the official story. When you see a poll, or a survey, or even a popular consensus, ask yourself, what would the Google search data say? What are the hidden incentives that might cause people to present a version of the truth that isn't entirely real? This doesn't mean becoming a cynic, but it does mean becoming a more critical and thoughtful observer of the world. Second, and perhaps more importantly, practice more empathy. The data in this book shows, over and over again, that beneath the polished exterior that people present on social media, there is a world of anxiety, insecurity, and doubt. Remember the author's update to the old self-help quote, "Never compare your insides to everyone else's outsides." The big data version is, never compare your Google searches to everyone else's Facebook posts. Knowing that you are not alone in your fears and your imperfections can be an incredibly comforting and liberating realization. That was a summary of Everybody Lies by Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. We've explored the main highways of his argument today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you travel the roads yourself. The magic of this book is in the hundreds of surprising stories and the quiet moments when a particular insight hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your friends, and the world around you. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.